Hi everyone, and welcome to Week 7 of BUSS420 Project Management. As if you haven't heard me say it already, here it is again, Week 7, another busy week. We have reading, a two-part discussion question, a Microsoft project assignment, a problem set, and then our final installment of the final portfolio project before we get to our weekly reflection. Let's take a look at these. Our readings for the week, well, in addition to our Angel lectures, up in our textbook on Chapter 13, we'll read about project evaluation and control. And that includes topics like control cycles, monitoring project performance, earned value management, and human factors. Starting out with project monitoring and control, Pinto describes a control cycle of setting goals, measuring your progress, comparing actuals with planned, and then taking action and recycling the process again. This is very much a process improvement loop. Now, Pinto also goes on to describe the S-curve that we use for tracking projects. And here's a typical S-curve that begins at the start of a project in the analysis phase and goes all the way through to the closure phase. Now, it gets its S shape because at the beginning of a project, we have relatively few resources working on it, only those that are doing the basic planning and analysis. It's in the execution phase, the implementation phase, when we expand the team and we go out and make those purchases of capital and our spending becomes increased and the slope of that curve also increases. And by the closure phase, the team is decreased, our slope decreases, and it gives us the final curve in that S shape. So we can plot our project performance actuals against that planned performance. So here the planned is the light blue line and the actual are the reds, and we're underspending. And I'm asking the question, is that a good thing? It might mean that we actually overestimated our activities, in which case it might be a good thing. Otherwise, it might mean that we're not making the progress or allocating the resources required to complete the tasks. And what we'll often see in a project that's underspending in the analysis and design phase, well, that can lead to overspending in later phases because we didn't properly do the requirements analysis or do the proper design, and we're making up for it later in the project. There's another mechanism we can use to help us measure progress, and that's to use milestone analysis. Now, a milestone is an event or a stage in a project that represents a major accomplishment. So here we see a nice Gantt chart with our analysis, design, implementation, and closure activities. And what we can do is set up a milestone after each one of those activities to signify its completion. Now, we can select milestones at the end of phases or activities, but there's no reason to. We can pick milestones anywhere within our project schedule where it makes sense to mark a completion or progress against a particular activity. Now, milestone analysis comes with a number of different benefits. We can use it as a motivator for the project team. It offers us points where we can reevaluate client needs, potential change, and certainly new risks. We can coordinate schedules and vendors. We can use these as project review gates. We can also use them to help us coordinate resources or create a delivery schedule. Another technique we can use in order to measure the progress against activities is to update the status and compare it against the baseline. And we'll have an activity this week in Microsoft Project to do just that. And what you'll see is, here in Analysis 1, the dark center line indicates the progress toward that milestone. And we can see in the design phase, we're about 75% of the way through it. So using a Gantt chart in this way, well, it's easy to understand. But if we are slipping and it's taking us longer to complete activities, it gives us no real insight into any of the underlying problems. Chapter 13 has another topic in it, earned value management, and that is a course unto itself, so we're only going to touch on some of the highlights. Now, the history of this: in the 1960s, the U.S. government began to question the ability of contracting agencies to accurately track their costs against multiple projects. So the powers that be came forward with earned value management, and there's a lot of terminology here in this topic, but we'll start out with some basics. PV, planned value, the cost estimated across the entire life cycle. Earned value, or EV, the cost of work that has been performed. AC, well, that's the actual cost of work performed. And we'll use those three in calculations for the Schedule Performance Index and the Cost Performance Index. Now, all of this definition and terminology is dry, so let's try and bring it to life with the following illustration. Let's start out with the following graph, and that is time increasing along the x-axis and the cost in dollars increasing along the y-axis. Now, after we complete our schedule in the initiation phase, we can calculate the planned value, how the spend starts off with a shallow slope. We add more to the project teams so the slope gets steeper, and then we go through the closure phase and the slope decreases again, that standard S-curve we reviewed earlier. But we can determine that in the initiation phase after we've completed our project plan and plot out the planned value. But let's move forward in the project, and let's say we're right about halfway through it. So right there we can draw that dashed line, and right there where the intersection of that dashed line is with our S-curve, well, that's our planned value. That's the value we had planned to achieve at that point in time based on our schedule. Now we can go to the accounting department and we can collect the actual costs of what it's taken us from the very beginning of the project and plot that as well. And where that intersects with the current time, well, that's the actual cost of the project at that moment in time. And we can review what the project has produced, what actual work outputs have been created, and determine what the earned value of those outputs are. So if we were to stop the project right here at that dashed line, that's the value that we've earned based on all the activities we've conducted up to that point in time. So here's an illustration of those three basic values: the actual cost from accounting, the planned value from our plan, and the earned value of the actual products we've produced up until that point in time. Let's just give those some simple values for now to help us understand those two calculations we talked about earlier. So now we can determine what our cost performance index is, given the formula EV divided by AC, and here with the values we assigned, well, that's 1 divided by 3, and that's 0.33. And we can calculate our schedule performance index as the earned value divided by the present value, and that's simply 1 divided by 2, or 0.5. Now those relationships, well, for schedule performance and cost performance index, if they're less than 1, as they are in this case, the project is well behind schedule and well behind the budget. If they're equal to 1, well, everything is exactly as we had originally planned it, and quite frankly, that never happens. If they're greater than 1, then the project is actually ahead of schedule or under budget. The issue here is, when do we realize the value? Both of these calculations take earned value as part of it. So when do we actually say we've earned the value of those activities? And there are a couple of rules, and the important thing here is that everybody in this system of projects, in the system of activities, agrees to the same rule. Whether it's all or nothing, 0 or 100%, whether it's the 50-50 rule, once begun, half done, or you actually try to determine a percentage, that really doesn't matter. What really matters is that everybody's in agreement as to which rule they use as to when they actually realize the earned value of an activity. So let's continue on with 4 more earned value management terms. That's the budget at completion, the estimate at completion, the variance at completion, and the estimate to completion. Again, very dry terminology, so let's use an illustration to bring it to life. So let's bring back that S-curve and where we were in time, and we know what the planned value is and the actual cost. And by simply following out our planned value, our planned costs, all the way till the time we're complete, well, that's simply the budgeted cost at completion, BAC. And starting at the point where we know our last actual cost, well, we can estimate what it will take to complete the project, and that will simply be our estimate at completion. So the variance, well, that's a fancy name for what's the difference between the estimate and the plan or the budgeted cost to completion. And the estimate to completion, well, that's simply the difference between the actual cost at the time that we're taking this measurement and the estimate at completion, or that red segment right there. Well, that's enough for the textbook for right now. Let's jump into our next assignment, which is discussion. And this is around project evaluation and control. It's a two-parter. You have just been informed by your client that your project budget has been slashed. It's been cut by 20%. And you have lost 2 project team members. And your project scope will remain the same. The question asks, how do you respond to this new information? And what type of project constraints are you up against? And what steps do you take, put yourself in the shoes of the project manager, and what steps do you intend to take to deal with this new information? Now the second part is based on a YouTube video, a lot like what we described here, and you're to supply what the differences are between BAC, EAC, VAC, and ETC. Now from the first part of the discussion, what information would you need to use these formulas to forecast a new schedule? Now our activities at the end of the week begin with the Microsoft project exercises. Now this is due on day 7 by Saturday midnight Eastern Time, and you're to post your attachment in the Dropbox in Angel. And please complete in Chapter 13, 13.1 to create a schedule with 4 tasks and percentage complete. And then we'll use that for 13.2 and apply some resource costs and create a report usage report. And in 13.3, we'll reuse that schedule again to create a project summary report. Now we'll finish that up with 13.4, which is to create a schedule with 18 tasks and then to set the percentage complete and view what the Gantt status looks like. Now for this week there are no templates, but there are separate coaching videos up in our Angel classroom to help you with that assignment. Now our next activity for the week are some Chapter 13 problems due on day 7, Saturday by midnight Eastern Time, and post this as an attachment to the Dropbox right there in Angel. And you're asked to complete in Chapter 13, number 4, to create a Microsoft schedule with 6 tasks using percentage complete. Number 6 is to calculate some project schedule variances. Number 7 is to calculate the planned and actual monthly budgets for a particular scenario. Number 8 is an earned value calculation based on that information in number 7. And then finally in number 11, we'll calculate the schedule and the cost performance indexes for given values. One of your last assignments for the week is, well, the final installment of the final portfolio project that's due on day 7, Saturday by midnight Eastern Time, and you'll post your attachment to the Dropbox right there in Angel. And we'll continue to work on your submission from previous weeks and complete the 4 sections marked Week 7, Managing Risks, Week 7, Analyzing Constraints, Week 7, Evaluating Controlling the Project, and then finally Week 7, Closing out the project. Now please refer to the portfolio rubric when completing this activity, and know that there's a separate coaching video and templates up there in Angel to help you with this final installment. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, yet another busy week full of readings, discussions, problem sets, and our final installment of the final portfolio project. Thank you all for watching the video, and if you have any questions you can email me at my email address there, or please post them up to an appropriate forum in Angel like the questions forum. Thank you all, and let's have an excellent week.